Shalom everyone, this is Veko speaking, and I want to start off by saying welcome and thank you all for checking out this video series on the virgin birth. Now, as many of you may already be aware, I had previously posted an entire series on the virgin birth a while back. In that series, I was refuting the silly arguments by a couple of Hebrewites, as I commonly call the ones that preach that racist doctrine, or the Israelite-only salvation doctrine, and I went fully in depth with a lot of specifics. Now, I'm sure many of you may already be fully educated in this area regarding the virgin birth, so I'm not making this video series in order to teach you the virgin birth or that it's true. I'm primarily making this video series in order to refute the arguments against the virgin birth, while at the same time kind of showing some people some new stuff, because I've learned a lot of stuff too as since the last time I've done this series. Now, with that said, let's begin our refutation by starting with this first clip.
She was a young maid. Exactly. So when the English translation came on the scene, the Roman Catholic Church sought an opportunity to interchange a word to trick people into following the pagan deities of Rome and Greece. During the time that Christ was living, the Roman Empire was following a virgin child while Christ was walking on the earth.
Yeah. So it's basically used while I was on the planet, basically. It was like that.
Yeah, and before him, in ancient Babylon, you had the worshiping of Nimrod and Tammuz, which was the virgin child. Yeah. Before that, you had Egyptian under Osiris and Horus. Yeah. Horus and Osiris, the virgin child. So the virgin child is actually a pagan deity. But the Roman Catholic Church, who are actually following the Babylonian ways, they deceive the masses and trick them into calling on Satan's child opposed to the Most High's child. So they had to deceitfully change a few words and then teaching society a false meaning.
Now, of course, from this point, we have to tackle the anti-birthers' unsubstantiated assertion that the doctrine of the virgin birth was influenced by or derived from the Catholic Church and or ancient pagan religions in order to deceive the masses into worshiping false gods. And to that, of course, I say that is stupid and ludicrous. And I dare any one of these anti-birthers to provide any hardcore substantial evidence to support that position. Now, as you can see, the anti-birthers will attempt to argue that the doctrine was borrowed or spawned from what's commonly called the mystery religions. Now, such ideology is commonly called syncretism. It's the idea that the tenets of Christianity has pagan roots from previous pagan religions. And this is, in fact, a very common and futile regurgitated argument used by many atheists in an attempt to debunk Christianity. It's definitely no surprise that many anti-birthers would also resort to this as a means to support their position. And now, some of you may already have heard of these icons from these mystery religions, such as Tammuz and Nimrod, as he already mentioned. But there's also Horus, Mithras, Attis, Krishna, Dionysus, Perseus, Romulus, so on and so forth. There's a few others as well that I can't think of right now. But I would highly recommend checking out a good debate on this very issue between James White and Dan Barker, which was done back in 2009 in Newberg, Oregon. I was actually blessed to have been able to go there to see the debate in person. So it was awesome. You could actually see a clip of it on my channel if you ever get a chance to it. But anyway, I digress. There is no way, other than assumption and wishful thinking, that it can be substantiated that Christianity borrowed its tenets from these pagan myths. Okay, none of these characters were born of virgins. Not a single one of them. Okay, any researcher will tell you that there are several different versions of some of these myths, and the ones that appear to be similar to the virgin birth do not even predate Christianity. Rather, the stories that are similar were derived from revised versions that came out hundreds of years after Christianity. Even with the myths that came out before Christianity, you still have to give an account for Psalms and the other prophets that prophesied of the coming Messiah prior to these pagan myths being developed. So this guy here we see in the video, I think he goes by the name of Ricard, and as far as I know, I believe he's the leader of another black Hebrew Israelite sect called the Gathering of Christ Church. He makes claim that the virgin birth was derived from pagan characters such as Nimrod and Tammuz. So I want to just take a few moments here and just kind of mention some of these characters here that a lot of the atheists and some of the anti-birthers will use. Nimrod, we'll start with that one. There is no substantial record of the claim that Nimrod, who was married rather to his own mother Semiramis, had been born of a virgin. There's no record of that. Tammuz, neither is there any record of this person that could be substantiated that this god of fertility named Tammuz was born of a virgin. In fact, there's more reason to believe that he came from the earth and not a woman. Another one, Horus. There's no record of Isis, Horus's mother, being a virgin. Set dismembered Osiris. Then Isis put Osiris's body back together and had intercourse with the dead body. Another version said that she made a handmade phallus, we'll say that for now, and used that because she could not find the one body part of Osiris to impregnate her. Yeah. Another version is Isis was in the form of a bird and had sex with the dead god and then gave birth to Horus, which is why you see the pictures of a man with a bird head. Next one is Romulus. We cannot actually verify that this was a virgin birth, since the story is that Romulus and his twin brother Remus were born of their mother Rhea Silvia. And yes, Rhea Silvia was called a Vestal Virgin, but a Vestal Virgin was only a priestess of the goddess named Vesta. Let me tell you, talk a little bit about that. One website states they, the Vestal Virgins, were responsible for maintaining the sacred fire within the temple of Vesta, the Forum Romanum. Other duties included performing rituals in regards to the goddess Vesta and baking the sacred salt cake to be used at numerous ceremonies in the year. And speaking of salt cakes and sacred fire, I can't help but to wonder if this goddess Vesta is the same Queen of Heaven that's mentioned in Jeremiah 7:18 and Jeremiah 44:17 through 25. But anyway, there is no record of Rhea Silvia, mother of Romulus, being an actual undeflowered young woman at the time of conception. Also, it should be noted that there is record that Rhea Silvia had intercourse with the god named Mars or the demigod named Hercules. Next one, we have Mithras. Mithras was not conceived by a virgin, but was born, or rather emerged, out of a rock, which is precisely what Jeremiah the prophet was probably ridiculing in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 27. This could be also be a good a verse to mock evolution as well. Next one, Dionysus. Only found in post-Christian sources, and there are at least two versions of the story. One of them is that Zeus incubated Dionysus in his thigh, and then Dionysus was born. Another one, Attis. One story says that Agdistis fell into a drunken slumber after drinking the wine-filled water that Dionysus made in a stream, and while in his drunken stupor, Agdistis was violently castrated, and the blood from the castration went into the earth and therefore brought forth a pomegranate tree or an almond tree. Sometime later, Nana, the virgin daughter of the local king, or Sangarius, I think it's pronounced, a river god, picked up the fruit or nut and placed it in her lap. And in one account, the fruit or nut mysteriously disappears. Nana then became pregnant by this fruit or nut that mysteriously disappeared in her lap, and thus the child Addis was conceived. Two more. Krishna, he was the 8th son of a princess named Devaki and her husband Vasudeva. No historical record of him being born of a virgin. And lastly, Perseus. We all know this guy. This is the character we see in the movie Clash of the Titans. His mother named Danae was his mother. She was impregnated by Zeus, who chose to impregnate her by assuming the form of a shower of gold. So, what do each of these stories have in common? They are either inconsistent in and of themselves, and or they reveal that the conceived individual was the product of some physical interaction of some sort. The virgin birth? No physical interaction whatsoever. No bow chicka bow wow with the Yahweh, all right? The Lord spoke it, declared it verbally, and it happened. The Lord spoke the entire universe into existence, ex nihilo. Surely he could have done the same thing with a woman named Mary. Now, lastly, another proof that the virgin birth did not originate from the Catholic Church was the fact that a man by the name of Justin Martyr, who I think was born around 100 AD, 225 years before the rise of Catholicism, spoke of the virgin birth in chapter 22 of his first apology. He said, "As we promised in the preceding part of this discourse, we will now prove him superior, or rather have already proved him to be so. For the superior is revealed by his actions. And if we even affirm that he was born of a virgin, accept this in common with what you accept of Perseus." Note that Martyr was not affirming that the virgin birth was a fraud or that it was derived from the pagans, but he said what he said in order to argue against the pagans, that by challenging them as to why it was so difficult for the pagans to believe in the virgin birth, but it wasn't hard for them to accept the nonsense of their own faith in Perseus. The virgin birth should be no more or less believable than the story of Perseus to the pagans. Now, why do I bring this up? Because again, we need to show everyone that the virgin birth did not originate from the Catholic Church. And according to the text in Martyr's apology, neither did the virgin birth doctrine originate from the mystery religions. Guys like this guy you see here look to the Marian worship that's being practiced today by many Catholics, and then asserts that this is proof that the doctrine of the virgin birth was birthed from Catholicism. And no offense to the guy, but the guy in the video has made it abundantly clear to me anyway, and to, I believe, the scholars that have been studying this issue for centuries, that he really has very little knowledge of what he's talking about.